Most people believe that if they could just feel more motivated, everything in their life would finally start to work. They wait for the spark. They wait for the energy. They wait for the perfect mood. But the truth is, motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes like the weather. Some days it's there, some days it isn't. And if your life depends on something that unstable, then your progress will always be unstable too. Real, lasting change does not begin when you feel ready. It begins when you become clear. Clarity is what turns effort into focus. Without it, people run in 100 different directions and call it hard work. With it, even small actions move you forward. Think about how many people wake up each morning already exhausted, not because they did too much yesterday, but because they don't know what today is really for. When there is no clear reason behind what you do, every task feels heavy. Every decision feels draining. You're not tired from the work. You're tired from the confusion. Here's the simple but uncomfortable truth. Human beings are not designed to commit to tasks. They are designed to commit to meaning. We will endure pain, sacrifice time, and push through fear when we believe in what we're doing. But when we don't, even easy things feel hard. That's why two people can do the same job, work the same hours, and one feels fulfilled while the other feels empty. The difference isn't the work, it's the why behind it. Most of us are taught to focus on what we want, what career, what income, what lifestyle. But what is not what drives us. You can achieve everything you thought you wanted and still feel lost, because what you wanted was never the problem. What you believed was missing was the problem. And beliefs live much deeper than goals. They live in our sense of purpose. Clarity forces you to confront those beliefs. When you know why you are doing something, it becomes a filter. You stop saying yes to things that look good but feel wrong. You stop chasing paths that impress others but drain you. You stop confusing movement with progress, and suddenly your life feels lighter, not because it's easier, but because it finally makes sense. This is why people who have a clear purpose don't need to be pushed. They don't need constant reminders. They don't need external pressure to keep going. They move forward because every step feels connected to something bigger than the step itself. Even failure becomes meaningful because it's part of the journey, not a sign that they were on the wrong road. When clarity enters your life, procrastination fades. Not because you become more disciplined, but because the work now has a reason. Fear loses its grip because you're no longer just protecting comfort. You're protecting something you believe in. And doubt becomes quieter because you know what you're moving toward, even if you don't yet know how you'll get there. That is why real change never begins with doing more. It begins with understanding more, understanding who you are, what matters to you, and why you are willing to show up even when no one is watching. When that becomes clear, everything else starts to fall into place. Every action you take is powered by a decision, and every decision you make is driven by a reason, whether you're aware of it or not. Most people move through life reacting to what's in front of them. They answer emails because they arrive. They go to work because it's expected. They say yes because it feels easier than saying no. But reaction is not the same as intention. And a life built on reaction is a life that slowly drifts away from what truly matters. This is where the habit of asking why changes everything. Not once, not occasionally, but as a way of thinking. When you ask why before you act, you pause the automatic behavior that keeps you stuck. You interrupt the pattern. You stop being pulled by habit and start being guided by purpose. That single question forces you to move from impulse to intention, from noise to meaning. Most people are very good at explaining what they do. They can tell you their job title, their responsibilities, their goals, but when you ask why they do it, they struggle. They give you surface answers: money, security, success, stability. Those are not whys, those are results. The real why is emotional. It's about who you want to become, what you stand for, and what kind of impact you want to have. Until you find that, everything else feels hollow. When you make asking why a habit, something remarkable happens. You start to notice how often you're about to make choices that don't actually serve you. You realize how many things you do out of fear, not belief. Fear of disappointing others, fear of falling behind, fear of being judged. And slowly, quietly, you begin to let those fears lose their control over you. Because when you know your why, you don't need to compare yourself to anyone else. Their journey is not yours. Their timeline is not yours. Their definition of success is not yours. Your decisions stop being about what looks impressive and start being about what feels aligned. And alignment is powerful. It creates a kind of confidence that doesn't come from ego, but from knowing you're walking in the right direction. This habit also changes how you handle difficulty. When life gets hard, people without a clear why see obstacles as reasons to quit. People with a clear why see obstacles as part of the path. The struggle doesn't disappear, but its meaning changes. You're no longer suffering for nothing. You're sacrificing for something. And that makes all the difference. Asking why doesn't make your life perfect. It makes it honest. It forces you to confront what you truly care about. It reveals when you're living someone else's dream instead of your own. And while that can be uncomfortable at first, it's also incredibly freeing. Because once you know what matters, you no longer waste energy on what doesn't. This is why this one habit can shift your entire life. It gives you back control. It turns your days from routines into choices. And when you live by choice instead of by default, you don't just move forward, you move with meaning. Discipline is one of the most misunderstood ideas in personal growth. People think it means forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do. They imagine struggle, pressure, and willpower. But real discipline doesn't come from pushing harder. It comes from caring deeper. When you truly believe in something, you don't need to fight yourself to act. You move naturally toward it, the same way you protect something you love without being told to. This is why knowing your why changes your relationship with effort. Without a clear reason, every task feels like a burden. You have to negotiate with yourself. You promise rewards, you rely on reminders, you feel guilty when you fail, but when your actions are connected to purpose, effort stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like expression. You're no longer working just to get something. You're working to honor something. Think about a time when you stayed up late, worked harder, or kept going even when you were exhausted. Chances are you weren't doing it because of discipline. You were doing it because it mattered. Maybe it was for someone you cared about. Maybe it was for a dream you believed in. That's not willpower, that's meaning. And meaning is far stronger than motivation. When you know why you are doing something, consistency becomes simple. Not easy, but simple. You don't need to ask yourself every day whether you should show up. You already decided. The decision was made when you chose your purpose. Everything after that is just execution. This is why people with clear purpose don't look disciplined. They look devoted. They're not forcing themselves to stay on track. They don't even see it as a track. It's just who they are. Without that clarity, people constantly start and stop. They join new programs. They try new routines. They look for new hacks. Not because they are lazy, but because they are disconnected. They're trying to build habits on top of uncertainty. And uncertainty can't support commitment. But when your why is clear, your habits have a foundation. Even when you don't feel like it, you still move forward because you know what's on the other side of the effort. You're not chasing a reward. You're protecting a belief. And beliefs are incredibly powerful drivers of behavior. This also changes how you deal with setbacks. When something goes wrong, people without a strong why think it means they're not good enough. People with a strong why think it means they need a new strategy. One feels personal, the other feels practical. And that difference keeps people in the game. Discipline built on fear eventually breaks. Discipline built on purpose lasts. Fear might get you to start, but it will never help you stay. Purpose, on the other hand, creates resilience. It gives you a reason to stand back up when it would be easier to quit. That is why the most successful people aren't the most intense. They are the most aligned. They don't rely on pressure. they rely on meaning. And once you find that, doing the work stops feeling like something you have to do and starts feeling like something you get to do. Failure is often misunderstood. We think people fail because they're not strong enough, not smart enough, or not committed enough. But most of the time, that's not true. Most people fail because they never really knew what they were aiming for in the first place. They were busy, but they weren't directed. They were working, but they weren't aligned. And when you don't know where you're going, every road feels like the wrong one. Unclear purpose creates fragile effort. You might start strong, full of excitement and ambition, but when the first obstacle appears, everything begins to shake. Doubt creeps in. You wonder if it's worth it. You question your ability. You look for something easier, not because you're weak, but because your goal was never rooted in something you deeply believed in. It was built on external expectations instead of internal conviction. When you don't know why you're doing something, every setback feels like a verdict. A bad day at work becomes proof you chose the wrong career. A failed attempt becomes proof you're not capable. A slow result becomes proof you should quit. But in reality, it's just part of the process. The problem isn't the obstacle. The problem is the meaning you attach to it. People with clarity see challenges differently. They don't interpret resistance as rejection. They see it as information. They ask what they can learn, not whether they should stop. Because their identity isn't tied to short-term outcomes. It's tied to a deeper purpose. And that gives them stability in moments when everything else feels uncertain. Most people don't quit because it's too hard. They quit because it stopped making sense. When effort feels disconnected from purpose, the mind starts searching for an exit. It looks for distractions. It looks for excuses. It looks for a new path that promises less discomfort. And over time, this cycle creates a life full of half-finished dreams and unrealized potential. Clarity breaks that cycle. When you know why you are on a path, even slow progress feels like progress. Even mistakes feel valuable. Even painful lessons feel purposeful. You're no longer measuring success by how quickly you get there, but by how truthfully you are moving. This is why people who are deeply connected to their purpose don't need constant reassurance. They don't need everyone to agree with them. They don't need immediate results. They have something stronger than approval, belief. And belief can carry you through moments that would break someone who is just chasing outcomes. When life becomes difficult, and it always does, you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your clarity. If you don't know why you're doing something, you will find a reason to stop. But if you do, you will find a way to continue. That is the difference between those who keep going and those who fade away. It's not talent, it's not luck, it's not even hard work, it's knowing what you're working for. One of the most powerful moments in a person's life is not when they achieve something big, but when they finally understand what truly matters to them. Because in that moment, everything begins to reorganize. Priorities shift, relationships change, decisions become clearer. It feels almost like waking up after a long sleep. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. When you gain clarity about your purpose, you don't need to force yourself to improve your life. Improvement happens naturally. You start making different choices without even trying. You choose better conversations. You choose better habits. You choose better opportunities. Not because you're trying to be successful, but because you're trying to be honest with yourself. This is how real change can happen quickly. When the inside shifts, the outside follows. You don't have to overhaul your entire life. You just have to realign it. And alignment works faster than effort ever could. When your actions match your beliefs, there is no internal resistance. You're no longer arguing with yourself. You're moving in one direction. Most people think transformation takes years, and sometimes it does. But clarity can happen in a moment. The moment you decide what you stand for, the moment you decide what kind of life is worth living, the moment you decide what you're no longer willing to tolerate, that single decision changes how you see everything. From that point on, distractions become obvious. You notice when something doesn't fit. You feel it when a situation is wrong for you. And instead of ignoring that feeling, you start to trust it. That trust is powerful. It becomes your internal compass. It guides you even when the path is uncertain. This is why people who live with purpose seem calm even in chaos. They may not have all the answers, but they know their direction. And direction is what gives people peace. When you don't know where you're going, every detour feels terrifying. But when you do, even the long road feels meaningful. Your purpose also changes how you relate to other people. You stop trying to be everything to everyone. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing constant approval because you already know who you are. And when you know who you are, you don't need the world to define you. This doesn't make life easy. It makes it clear. You will still face challenges. You will still feel fear. You will still make mistakes. But you will face them with a sense of groundedness that most people never experience. You won't be drifting anymore. You'll be navigating. And that is the real gift of this one habit. When you consistently ask why, you bring your life back into focus. You stop living on autopilot. You stop reacting to everything around you. You start responding from a place of intention. That's why this habit can change your life overnight. Not because everything suddenly becomes perfect, but because everything finally becomes purposeful. And when your life has purpose, even the smallest steps feel like progress.